I like stories. I think some of you all know my favorite sermons to preach are the ones where we get to dive into the story from Scripture, seeing what's behind the scenes, looking at the characters, seeing how their story echoes our lives. I love to tell stories. I think they bring a deeper meaning out of our life as we look at our own story and learn to tell it and see God in it. I love to tell stories. But I think today's scripture calls us to look less at the story and more at the storytellers. The stories of Saul, of David, of Solomon, the scriptures we've wrestled with for the last few weeks have come from one people, one community, one united culture, one story. But that changes. As history unfolds, the kingdom becomes divided. We get Judah in the south and Israel in the north. We end up with two people telling their story of their life with God. Two stories, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. They've become competitors after the kingdom divides. It starts with the end of Solomon's reign and his being lured to the different beliefs of his wives, his many, many hundreds of wives, many of which were created as partnerships, marriage alliances with other kingdoms. But these political alliances that become marriages, become relationships, and Solomon starts to be pulled in different directions, and God says, this will be the last united kingdom in this place. And so Solomon's children are part of a divided world. Jeroboam becomes king, and the kings that follow after him in the north, all according to the text, move away from the Lord. They sin against the Lord. The interesting thing is here, who's telling the story? It's the people in the south. Those in the south tell us the story of the division. They tell the story of what the north was like and what they're like. And there's this interesting phrase that comes up, depending on your translation. Basically what it says is, and again the people in the north continued to do what was evil in the sight of the Lord. The people in the south did also, but not like them. In other words, they said, we're not perfect, but we can't be as bad as those people up there. The people in the south tell the story of their relatives and their failure to be the people of God. These two people, north and south, are related. They are connected still, but they're a family that remembers both the nostalgia of time together and also the bitterness of it. They know the divisions that are between them, and over the years, the sentimentality was replaced with bitterness. Over time, the north actually grows stronger than the south. They actually do battle a couple of times, and the north always prevails when they meet on the battlefield. The north gloats. They remind the south that they're just a couple of tribes, and the north is the majority of the old tribes, that they are the stronger nation. To that day, they become arrogant and boastful, posturing over the south. But the south is where Jerusalem is. It's where the temple was built. It's where the Ark of the Covenant resided. It's where they thought God lived in their story. They might have been smaller, but they were the more spiritual, the more religious. They kept the law and they kept the faith the right way. The north could be as strong as they wanted in might, but the south were strong in the Lord. They are competitors, yet still related. Maybe you've been in this family before. Over time, the north, in all its strength, is humbled. There's always a bigger bully on the block. Someone new always rises to match any challenge. And in this case, for Israel, it is Assyria. The prophets have warned about Assyria's rise. They've warned about keeping the faith of God. But Assyria comes and knocks them off their pedestal. Assyria has conquered many lands, and Israel is the next. They are defeated, they are conquered, and they are further divided. Just like will happen to the south in the future, those in the north are conquered, and the priests, the leaders, the strongest in the community, the most wealthy, are taken away into exile. If you want to control a people, the theory was, take away those that would lead them. Take away their resources, their artists, their creative thinkers, those who would inspire, those who would organize. And so they did. Assyria took those people and gave them new homes in other lands. And in their place, they brought people from those conquered lands and put them in Israel. They took over the homes in Samaria, the capital of Israel, and the surrounding towns. Now, what was a community that was still connected by their identity in God has become a melting pot. A diverse community of people from different cultures speaking different languages. Assyria has conquered many lands, and now this crushing story becomes a part of the North's history. It also becomes a cautionary tale told by those in the South. Children, when you grow up, you better be good, or you'll end up like the North. Leaders, you better do right, or you'll end up like those people in the North. People of faith, you better keep the law, you better keep the commandments, or God will do to you what he did to the North. You can almost imagine it as a frightening tale to keep people in line, a guilt story to measure behaviors. This is why the writer of the story matters more than the characters. The South are telling the story. They're giving meaning to the events that they observe in the North. They're naming where God is and where God clearly in their mind is not in the story. God is clearly with them in the South, not in the North. Our Southern observers tell us how the population changes. They tell us about the forced immigration, the custom and gods brought into Israel from other lands. Old ways are forgotten. Old ways are ignored. The Southern observers tell us how a priest tried to save them, how a priest was sent to teach them the ways, to protect them from the lions and protect them from God. The Southern observers tell us how they practiced multiple faiths, receiving the teachings of a priest, but holding on to their old customs and sharing them among God's people. I wonder, how would a historian of the North told this? I wonder how a historian from the North would have discussed the faithfulness of the people. We were divided, they might say, and our leaders taken away. We were left without priests and our holy places empty. We did our best to stay connected to God. So much had changed. All the things we could hold on to, all the tangible things were gone. The leaders were all gone. We did the best we could. Ironically, this is the same argument the South will use when they are conquered by Babylon generations later. These are the same things they will say when it's their turn to be conquered. I wonder what a historian from the North might say about the refugees that come in. I wonder what a historian from the North might say about the refugees who've come in. We also did what our faith calls us to do. We welcomed strangers. We provided hospitality to those who were from a faraway land as God called us to do. We mourned for the past while trying to forge a future together. We practiced the hospitality of our faith in profound ways, for we were once strangers in a strange land, thus said the Lord. A historian from the North might tell this story differently. We were all once strangers in a strange land, so we welcomed them in and gave them a home. It almost ironically sounds a lot like the story told for many years about the United States. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, building a melting pot community of people from all over the world. Southern observers tell us how the North fell from God. Southern observers tell us how the North was caught up in the idolatry of foreigners. But those are judgments to be made from a distance. Those are judgments to be made from a place of comfort, from the sidelines, from the outside. Those are judgments to be made outside relationships that are being formed with new people as they move in. For a moment, let's put ourselves in the shoes of those in the North. I want you to imagine what it might have been like to live through that chaos. Imagine that the government you know is gone. Imagine your church community is split, at least half taken away, including everyone who's in charge of something. Taken away. Imagine your neighbors, the people you've lived next to for many years, gone. And you remain. And you remain. Now imagine you have new neighbors who've moved in and none of them speak your language. Imagine you have new neighbors, none of whom cook the same foods you cook. None of whom decorate for the same holidays you decorate for. Whose cultural calendar is different than yours. Whose dress, whose look, whose customs are different than yours. Refugees from far away who feel isolated and alone and are just trying to make things feel like they used to where they lived. Imagine your new government. Imagine the new government arises and doesn't see a difference between the secular and the sacred. They see Halloween and Easter as the same. They see St. Patrick's Day or Labor Day or Super Bowl Sunday the same as Christmas. Okay, some of us get Super Bowl Sunday and Christmas confused too. But imagine a government that treated the secular and the sacred the same. Imagine all the old ways fading away. What do you do? What do you do? Hold on tight to what we have left? Bottle it up? Hold it tight? Seal it away? Protect it? Take it and run off? Carry it away to some distant land? Move in with the relatives in the South? Lord help us. No. They're worse than the new people, right? They're the ones that judged us. We can't go back there. So what do? Maybe we lean into the new ways. Maybe we seek a new way of life. But then there's the old. There's what's familiar. There's what gave our lives meaning. How can we let it go? So we find a blended life. We find a blend of the old and the new, incorporating the customs of the new neighbors we build relationships with, reaching out in the hospitality of our faith and learning about them and where they're from. We create a blended way, moving forward together. Israel becomes a melting pot of cultures. It continues to be a central trade route on the Mediterranean. It continues to be the crossroads from Europe to Arabia and to Africa. There are lots of people coming through, including those who are of different cultures now living there. Israel becomes a melting pot, very diverse and always changing. Our southern observers scoff at this evolution of Israel. But in our context today, sitting in 2018 in Southern California in the United States of America, with so many cultures around us, with so many cultures even within our church family, can we not relate to those in the North? We are a blended community. We are a trade center. We are a cultural convergence in this place. So we get the challenge of wrestling with new cultures and traditions. We get the blessing of diversity and the opportunity it brings. We know what it means to have a strange custom move in next door. We know what it means to have what felt so familiar seem to fade away. We get what it means to have others move in and think we are very strange. We've experienced it. We live it. We know what it means to celebrate our faith while respecting others. We know what it means to seek common ground in the common strangeness that we share. Our southern observers scoff at the evolution of Israel. And today, we might just dismiss those people as judgmental, stuck in the past. We might even call them racist. I prefer to characterize them as a people who struggled with relative truth. They had all the tangibles. They had the temple, the things you could walk into, hold on to, the priests. They were the ones that started writing down stories on scrolls kept there, while those in exile tried to write it there. The stories are evolving in two places, and one group got to be where the stories happened. They got to be inside Jerusalem, pilgrimage to it. It was easier. Truth was more concrete. They had a hard time imagining a relative truth. Maybe you could say God got too big for them in the north. When we are locked into one way of seeing the world, when we're locked into God operating only one way, when we're locked into our way, it's hard to see the beauty of another way. It's hard to see God at work in others. It's hard to see God at work in the world if God's not operating in the way we expected. Still, there is a danger in our diversity. Sometimes we struggle to name what we believe, to name our own core values out of fear of offending someone else. We sometimes struggle to name our sacred truths, to name what it is we stand on, the fear and fragility of our own beliefs that we've not always taken enough time to explore. Sometimes we struggle to live out what we believe. We struggle to live out what we believe, and our sacred truths become secular traditions. Our sacred truths become secular traditions. Say that again. Our sacred truths become secular traditions. Our text today challenges us to find the sacred in our traditions, in our daily lives, and live out of that faith. To find the sacred also in the lives of others, in their culture and in their story, and to celebrate the sacredness that we see, not dismiss it. Not dismiss it as some secular custom, some antiquated thought that they've brought from a different time and place. Our challenge today is to find the sacred and not lose ourselves. To find the sacred and not live in silence. A melting pot of cultures is a beautiful idea. But in that analogy, we often see ideal beauty lost, melting away. A melting pot of cultures is a beautiful ideal, but it doesn't call us to individual accountability of the identity we hold for our decisions to declare who we are and whose we are and how we will live that out. It allows us just to say, well, everything's fine. And some piece of us gets lost in the melting. Let's think instead of a salad bowl where we're all individual ingredients, all mixed together, all blended into something more. Yet at our core, who we were made to be. We're together, and it changes everything. We're together, and it makes us all more. This requires each of us to know who God made us to be. It requires each of us to empower others to be who God made them to be. It requires a personal accountability for our faith. We can't just sit back and say, whatever you believe, it doesn't matter to me. It requires us to figure out what we do believe and share it with others while making room for them to share their sacred truth with us. In a few weeks, our Jewish brothers and sisters will celebrate Rosh Hashanah. And while it may not be a sacred day that we practice, it is for them. And we can see God at work and see it as a sacred moment. In a few weeks, our Muslim sisters and brothers will celebrate Muharram. And while it may not be sacred for us, it is for them. And we can see God at work in their celebration. In a month or so, we will celebrate Halloween, or All Hallows Eve, Dia de los Muertos. And so for many, it may be a secular celebration. But I dare you to tell our Latino brothers and sisters that that is not a sacred day, as they remember those ancestors before them, the cloud of witnesses around them still. Tell them it's just a secular holiday. For some, it may be secular. Other evangelicals and those with a more concrete understanding of faith may see it even as a satanic holiday. But we can see the beauty and the sacred in that by learning about the customs of others. Our challenge, the challenge Israel struggled with, is to be who we are and share our sacred story when we can. And be who we are and let others be who they are. Let them share their sacred story when they can. We share our sacred story when we can, and we listen to their sacred story when we can. And we will see God at work in each. When we listen to each other's sacred story, whether it be across cultures or simply across the pews, when we listen to each other's sacred story across cultures, across families, across those who've lived in different places, those who've lived as a different gender than us, with a different understanding of orientation than us, those who've lived a different generation than us, when we listen to each other's stories, when we listen for the sacred in it, we hear each other. We hear God. When we listen across our divisions for the sacred, God is still speaking. Amen.